Good evening and welcome. Tonight we're going to be going over the history and geography of Ecuador. We'll do that and then we'll flip through this book and I'll show you some cool pictures. It is storming outside right now and it's kind of cool because we don't really get big rainstorms where I live, so it's kind of nice, but it's going to last all through tonight and all through tomorrow night. So for the next couple of videos, you're probably going to hear rain in the background. I wonder if I just open this like a smidge. Yeah, it's pretty rainy outside. It's awesome. We're not used to rain where I live, so it's very refreshing, very exciting to hear. But let's get into Ecuador, where it's a lot rainier than it is where I live. Ecuador, as you can see, is in the northwestern corner of South America. It has this coastline with the Pacific Ocean, and it borders just Colombia and Peru. Ecuador has 4 main geographic zones. The first one would be over here. It's known as La Costa, or the coast. It's pretty populous, but it's mainly the obvious shipping, but also agricultural sector of Ecuador. Their main export is bananas, and they actually produce more bananas than anywhere else in the world. Dole and Chiquita have their main plantations here apparently, so if you buy those bananas, you're almost always buying bananas that were grown in Ecuador. Guayaquil is on the coast. It's the largest city in Ecuador, and as you can imagine, very beautiful beaches and things like that. But then slicing right through Ecuador is the second zone, La Sierra, which means the mountains, and these are the Andes Mountains. They're very, very high and very volcanically active. Ecuador has loads of volcanoes, active, dormant, and extinct. The biggest one, or not the biggest one, but the most famous one, is just outside the capital city of Quito here. I'll show you cool pictures in this book, but you can also see that there are lots of cities in this area. There's the capital, of course, but lots of major city centers in here as well. And then we have this section. This is El Oriente, and it's basically mostly just the Amazon rainforest. If you think of the Amazon rainforest, it's exactly like that. Lots of trees, lots of rain, lots of rivers that flow into the Amazon, lots of animals. Ecuador is actually one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. I think the most biodiverse per square kilometer. Loads of animals and plants and insects, things like that. The fourth one you can't see on this map. It is the Galapagos Islands. They're just kind of over there a bit. The Galapagos are famous. I'm going to do a whole video for you guys about the Galapagos Islands coming up. If you're not subscribed already, be sure to do so you don't miss out. The Galapagos, of course, are famous for their biodiversity. It's where the theory of evolution was first put into practice and basically proven when the scientist Charles Darwin visited and noticed that on each island there were the same birds, but they had developed differently depending on how that island was. I feel like I'm explaining this really badly, but we'll talk about it in the Galapagos book. But he basically figured out that birds changed over time when they were, isolated from each other, and evolved to adapt to their surroundings, and then applied that to basically all life on the planet and created evolution. Well, not created evolution, but theorized evolution, and it's proven, But the Galapagos are extremely biodiverse, lots and lots of endemic animals, meaning you can only find them there. and lots of really famous ones like tortoises, there's penguins, there's blue-footed boobies. I'll show you pictures in here if you don't know what they look like. They're really cute, and they do have blue feet. They're birds, by the way. But Ecuador is a lovely, lovely country. I'll show you when we get to the pictures, but let's talk about its history. People have been living in Ecuador for a long, long time, about 16,500 years ago. There were lots and lots of different cultures that lived throughout Ecuador, mainly along the coast, but there were also some big ones in the mountains, like there was the Quitus, where we get Quito. There were the Cañari, where we get Cuenca. But the more famous ones, I suppose, would be along the coast, like the Valdivia, and the La Tolita. There's a Las Vegas culture. There are a whole bunch of different cultures that spring up in this area. They all kind of got along. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they traded. Sometimes they integrated. They all had different languages. Some of them merged. Things like that. And it stayed that way until the Incas came. So I've already covered Peru, where I talked extensively about the Incas and did a whole video about them. But they came about in about the 1400s or so and really took off. They dominated the territories in Peru and Bolivia, just kind of swept in and said, we're in charge now. They got up here to Ecuador, right? And, took over this area pretty well, but not so much this area. They met the tribes in this area and they fought back against the Incas and remarkably won out. Which is incredibly impressive considering it was the very mighty Inca Empire. But the Inca did control the coastal and the mountainous areas of Ecuador until they didn't. The Spanish arrived in 1532. They captured and killed Atahualpa, the leader of the Inca, and they wound up taking over this part of Ecuador. In 1563, it became part of the Viceroyalty of Peru. Later, that turned into the Viceroyalty of New Granada. And it wasn't the most exciting part of the Spanish colonies. There were a lot more exciting things going down in Peru and Bolivia, where they were mining and planting. And then, of course, they had Colombia, Venezuela. A lot more exciting things were happening in other parts of South America, not so much in Ecuador. So it was kind of like the backwater part of the Spanish colonial empire. But on August 10th, 1809, in Guayaquil was the first big call for independence from Spain, which I know was the first in South America to say we need to be independent from Spain. And I'm pretty sure it was the first in Latin America, all of the Spanish territories in this hemisphere. It started here in Guayaquil. There was, of course, a long battle for independence that lit up all of South America. The region here of Ecuador achieved their independence on May 24th, 1822, and they became part of Gran Colombia. I've talked about this on my videos on Colombia and Venezuela, but it was essentially a big, giant country of Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, and Panama. It was led by Simón Bolívar, who envisioned all of South America becoming one big, unified country, but that's a really intense pipe dream that obviously didn't work out. It fell apart in 1830, and Ecuador became its own thing. There were... how should I phrase this? Let's start with the whole concept of presidents of Ecuador. There have been multiple, of course, but many of them have been deposed or assassinated, and that all really has to do with the liberal versus conservative ideals, right? So for the conservative side, they were more traditional, when Spain was in control, Catholicism was the big to-do, And the conservatives believed that if they stuck to those principles and followed the church, that would be the best for the country. Whereas the liberals wanted these new radical ideas of democracy and basically socialism for the time. A few other countries in South America were embracing it over time, kind of more like what was happening in parts of America, parts of Europe. And as it picked up momentum, especially in Europe, it picked up in Ecuador. So the best examples of these two for the conservatives was the president Gabriel Garcia Moreno. He was in charge in the 1860s, and he was very pro-Catholic, pro-conservative, very strict on that. He wound up assassinated. And on the other side, there was the Liberal Revolution of 1895, where Eloy Alfaro was president. Very leftist, very kind of like socialist for the time. He was also assassinated really horribly too. And that's been going back and forth ever since, honestly, ever since like Ecuador became a thing. But I'll come back to that in a bit. I also want to talk about the border disputes. So, South American countries became independent kind of almost all at once in like the 1820s, 1830s. And as they were discovering these resources, they wanted to claim them, of course. So around the borders of Ecuador, there were lots of resources, and all the countries around them fought for territory. Colombia fought with Ecuador in 1832, and in 1916, Brazil had a big to-do in 1904, to the point where Brazil doesn't even border Ecuador anymore. And then there's Peru, who fought with Ecuador from basically their time of independence in 1830 up until about 1942. And it would pick up later. I'll get into it. Ecuador lost every single time. They were far outnumbered, far overpowered, and that's why Ecuador is much, much smaller than its big South American neighbors. I believe it was in the 1930s or 40s when the economy picked up. They really profited off of World War II, but this was also the time when the government was replaced by a military government. There was the 1944 Glorious May Revolution, which returned civilian power to the government. But that would change. Let's see, in 1979, there was one president that was elected that was actually really beloved and received the most votes out of any president of Ecuador. His name was Jaime Roldos Aguilera, and he seemed like a really positive leader for Ecuador, but he was killed in a plane crash in 1981, and that sparked a lot of different types of military takeovers and coups and things like that. Also, the conflict with the border with Peru picked up in 1981. It escalated into a full-on war in 1995. There was a peace agreement in 1998 that officially ended the border dispute for good. Again, Ecuador didn't really win out in it, but peace was finally established since, these disputes started in the 1830s and it wrapped up in 1998. It's been a big to-do, but it's over now, thankfully. And really, the government of Ecuador has not been very smooth, but it really kind of started to smooth in 2006 when Rafael Correa was elected. In 2017, Lenin Moreno was elected. They are both very liberal, very leftist, and in Correa's case, very, very socialist leaders. In April 2021, Ecuador elected Guillermo Lasso, their first right-wing leader in a very long time. So, like in most democratic countries, the political power goes back and forth between the two major parties. That's a very normal thing in this day and age of democracy. It's nothing to worry about too much, but I also say the indication of a good democracy is if protests are allowed to happen and if they're peaceful but the people get their voices heard. And that's definitely been the case in Ecuador. They've been having major protests all throughout the 2010s, the biggest being in 2019 when the protesters overran Quito. Not a great sign for democracy, but I mean, if people have the right to march in the streets and demand what they need to demand for their rights, I consider that a good sign for democracy personally. So if people are allowed to protest and demonstrate without any extreme backlash, I say that's a thumbs up for me. So we really have to see what's going to happen to Ecuador in the future. Like I said, their government has never really been 100% stable. This period in the 2000s, like since like the late 2000s, early 2010s, was really like the most quote-unquote stable part of their government. But even then, it's not 100%, so we'll have to see. It's a very interesting country. Let's get into the book, and I'll show you some pictures. Here we go. This is my favorite part. Look at this lovely lady. She's very beautiful. Let's see what we've got here. A big, lovely market. Look at this blue sky and the mountains in the background. This lady here is weaving a Panama hat. So these are Panama hats, we call them in English. They're not from Panama, they're from Ecuador, but apparently they were sold to traders in Panama who sold them to the United States. So people in America call them Panama hats. This is a picture from the Galapagos Islands, very beautiful. Here's a political map of Ecuador, and here are the Galapagos Islands. You know what I didn't point out? Like the most important part of its geography, I just remembered. Let me show you one here. Is the equator. Because apparently Ecuador is Spanish for equator. The equator cuts right through here. It also cuts through the Galapagos. Maybe there's a better map in here. It cuts through like right about here. And obviously the country is named after the equator. San Rafael Falls, the highest waterfall in Ecuador. It's very beautiful. Here's a big shopping mall. It kind of looks like the shopping malls down in like LA, Orange County. Just like big giant complexes. Big gorgeous snow-capped mountains. This is a very famous rock formation in the Galapagos. Guayaquil, big major city. Aha, here we go. A geographic map of Ecuador. Let me show you the equator cutting through there and through the Galapagos. And you can see all these big mountains and volcanoes in the Andes Mountains. Look at this very gorgeous flower in the rainforest. And this is Cotopaxi, the big volcano just outside of Quito. It's dormant, which means it's not exploding, but it hasn't exploded in like a very, very, very long time, as you can tell by all the snow covering it. It's a very beautiful peak. Oh, this guy is exploding though. This is Tungurahua, blowing its top. And this is an amazing picture. Look at these alpacas. Very, very fluffy, up in the mountains, staring straight into the photographer. This is the town of Baños, very famous for its hot springs, natural hot springs, hence the name Baños. The Napo River, which flows into the Amazon River. Beautiful Galapagos Islands. And a lovely day in Guayaquil. A not so lovely day. This is Babajayo. It flooded. Very sad. This is Cuenca. Very beautiful, beautiful city. You can see all the Spanish architecture there. A very lovely ocelot, very sweet cat. A pygmy marmoset. See, they're the smallest monkeys in the world. It says their bodies are just 5 inches. Very beautiful flower called a heliconia. Very lovely. The canopy of the Amazon. A jaguar, looking beautiful. And a little chompy dwarf caiman, ready to chomp. Look at this frog. Look at this distinguished gentleman. Look how he sits. It's very distinguished. And, oh, that's what I didn't mention either. How did I skip that in my notes? Oil. So, in 1972, oil was discovered in the Amazon. They built a big pipeline. It flows out from the Amazon and goes to Esmeraldas over there. It's obviously a big point of contention because there have been leaks and deforestation, but it's helped out the economy of Ecuador tremendously. So it's a little debatable. The Andean condor, the largest, I think it's the largest flying bird, isn't it? I believe it's the national bird of Ecuador. Here's a tapir. Very unusual animal, but pretty cute. Beautiful rainforest, or cloud forest. And the mangroves, very swampy coast. Here are blue-footed boobies, and as you can tell, they've got blue feet. The bluer their feet, the better they can attract a mate. Here's Charles Darwin. I very poorly described at the start of this video. He created the theory of evolution after studying some birds in the Galapagos. And here is a very beautiful Galapagos tortoise. Look at this. The Latolita culture created this really cool sculpture. Oh, here's a neat map of all the different early civilizations. You can see the Las Vegas, the Valdivia, La Tolita, the Manta, the Cañari, the Cara, the Puruja, and the present-day border of Ecuador. Lots of different cultures. And what's interesting, because the Incas didn't really absorb the cultures here like they did in other parts of South America because of all the backlash and resistance to them, a lot of these cultures and languages are still preserved from their old times. Look at this majestic mask. The mask of the sun god by the La Tolita culture. Here's a map of the Inca Empire. You can see how much of Ecuador was a part of it. And here is a city in Ecuador built by the Incas called Tombabamba. One of the Incan rulers, it's Huayna. And Sebastián de Belalcázar, one of the conquistadors who took over Ecuador. This, on this coin here, is one of the men who sparked the independence movement. He was Francisco Eugenio de Santa Cruz y Espejo. And this is what Guayaquil looked like back in the day. A map of Gran Colombia. You can see Ecuador here. It was part of the Department of Quito. And Juan José Flores was the first president of Ecuador. Here is Gabriel Garcia Moreno that I mentioned before. There's some bananas getting shipped out. And here's some oil pipeline going through the jungle. This was the Peruvian Ecuadorian border peace agreement between President Alberto Fujimori of Peru and President Jamil Mahuad of Ecuador. And here's another El Loco, not so great ruler of Ecuador who fled with a lot of money. Not cool. Some people voting. The government working hard. This is Rafael Correa, who was president in the time this book came out. There he is at work. Here's the National Congress. Isn't it a beautiful building? Look at this. Very lovely. This is in a court, apparently. Sorry for the loud car outside. The loud cars are gone, I think. They seem twice as loud when it's rainy. Let's read about the flag of Ecuador. The top half of Ecuador's flag is yellow. The bottom half consists of 2 horizontal stripes, one blue and one red. The flag design hails back to Gran Colombia, which was formed in 1821 by Ecuador, Colombia, and Venezuela. Yellow symbolizes Ecuador's former association with Gran Colombia. Blue stands for independence from Spain, and red represents courage. In the center of the flag is a coat of arms that features Mount Chimborazo, the nation's highest peak, the first steamboat built in Ecuador, and the condor, Ecuador's national bird. Rafael Correa, meeting with some U.S. officials, it says. Here's a map of Quito, downtown area, and look at this gorgeous, the Basilica of the National Vow. It's very lovely, very European, isn't it? Some banana trees. And building a car, the factory. A pipeline. And this is what their money used to look like. Ecuador actually uses the American dollar as their currency. Some coffee plants. And here's a cool industry map. You can see the oil out here. I don't know how I forgot to mention that in the history. I just completely skipped over that whole part in my notes. I knew I was leaving something out. This is on a flower farm. Looks like some roses. Ecuador exports a lot of flowers. Yeah, it says the 3rd largest flower exporter in the world. Comment below if you remember what the number 1 is. I already covered it. Big shrimp farm. And logging is a big industry in Ecuador as well. And this lady is making some beautiful carpets. Some very traditional patterns. Making some Panama hats. And tourism, especially this kind of ecotourism, is becoming popular in Ecuador. Beautiful beach on Manta. This is the Pan American Highway. It's a road that goes from Alaska all the way down to the southern tip of Argentina. There is a little interruption in Panama, I believe, or Colombia. I think it's in Panama. Yeah, Panama, I believe. But you could drive all the way down North and South America and go through Ecuador in the process. Very beautiful face. And lots of very beautiful faces. Here's a population map. You can really see most people living in the cities up here and in the La Costa area. This is just people, apparently. More beautiful faces. Look at the baby wearing the hat. So cool. And these people, this is the Quechua people. They harvest ice up in the Andes and wrap it up in straw and sell it. Some more indigenous peoples. These are the Saraguros. And the Otavaleño people make these really beautiful cloths and tapestries and rugs. This is a Tzachila man, and the men in this tribe use these fruits to shape and dye their hair red like this. A big ethnic group map. You can see all the different cultures around. There's so many that have been preserved. Like the Shuar people. Love that. Some women hard at work apparently at the bank. can see the Western clothes and traditional clothes. There we go. These are Afro-Ecuadorians selling some fruit. And this is Jamil Mahuad, one of the former presidents, and it's talking about how he's Lebanese Ecuadorian. And some Chinese Ecuadorians. And Barack Obama. This is just talking about the Spanish language. Beautiful church. And a Catholic sermon. Or mass, I should say. This is the oldest church in South America. It's called the Church of the Society of Jesus. Look at these columns. It's so beautiful. This is on the Day of the Dead. She's at the cemetery remembering her loved ones. And it says these are Protestants praying outside their church. And these are some traditional shaman doing a ceremony. And more traditional ceremonies, it looks like, with some music. More traditional ceremonies with the big old maypole, looks like. And some more wonderfully traditional music and costumes and processions. And some more traditional dancing with their beautiful costumes. And some traditional panpipes, the national instrument of Ecuador. Promise I'll stop. No, I'm not. Traditional weavings, the beautiful colors, and traditional Ecuadorian jewelry, lots of beautiful beads, and some not so traditional modern art. This is by Osvaldo Gayasamin. And the Bank Museum includes some really beautiful gold pieces from way back. This is Joao Rojas playing football for Ecuador. This guy, his name's Jefferson Perez. He won the first Olympic medal, but it was a gold medal for Ecuador. So first gold medal, and it was for speed walking. Congratulations, Jefferson. Some people who aren't speed walking, but enjoying their day. Working hard in school. This picture, it says it's for a quinceañera. They look a little young, and they're wearing what looks like communion dresses, but I'll take their word for it. I love this photo. We've got mom, her two babies. Love the outfit, traditional clothes, and their sheepies. Locro, a soup made from potatoes, cheese, and avocado. That sounds amazing. Here's a Day of the Dead procession, very solemn. And not so solemn Christmas lights, very festive. And in Ecuador, they make these big paper mache figures to burn them to represent the end of the old year and starting anew. That's pretty cool. That's the end of our book tonight. Ooh, squeaky. Thank you so much for watching. It was a little chaotic, this video, but doing my best. Thank you again. I hope that you found this video relaxing and educational. I've got some whisper videos coming up about Ecuador for you this week. And like I said, a video about the Galapagos. You don't want to miss that. So, thanks again. The cars are so loud tonight. Listen to them go. I hope this was relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a very good